very early in my career, I was working on this project and we had to place an order. And this guy calls me up and said, we'd like to give you 10% commission on it. And I was aghast at this brazenness, that, okay, what the hell? We are both serving this client.
Right.
You want me to collude with you to sort of undercut what he's getting.
Yeah.
How is that even a thing, right? Obviously, now I realize that it's very widespread.
Yeah.
Right. And I realize that it's structured, and I realize that, but I think part of the reason why we moved away from it, because I didn't want to be the architect getting the handout, or being offered the handout from the guy saying that, oh, you're doing me a favor, so here's a little something for you. And because in my mind, and obviously I never worked with that particular company again. But now what happens is that because we are the purchasers, right? So we are in a position to say that, okay, we want to bring you down to whatever you're most comfortable with, right? But you don't have to account for any more margins beyond that, right? So we want to be purchasing from you at the correct market price and therefore delivering the best value to the customer. Part of the reason why we're still in business is because we have a good reputation when it comes to these things. I mean, this industry is, I don't know whether I should say this on camera or not.
If it's something bad, we'll edit it out.
No, but I'm happy to say this because I say this to everybody openly anyway.
Huh.
I think in this industry there is so much uh, collusion against the client when it comes to product, when it comes to pricing of products.
Yeah.
That I think that we are doing ourselves a disservice as an industry, right? Collectively, the industry has a bad reputation because of the fact that a designer or an architect may not want to ask for a correct fee from a client and therefore would want to compensate themselves by, for lack of a better word, collusion, right? And I think that it's such a simple fix. I mean, if you do want to make an extra money, you should be transparent and say that, okay, I'm going to take a commission for, designing this product or ordering this product or whatnot.
Right.
I thankfully don't have that problem, right? Because we are the purchasers,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't have to worry about.
But it's built into your margins, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the kickback that architect would otherwise earn on the side. Sadly, it is very rampant in this industry, and I'll share my experience with this as well. But that's kind of built into your costing.
So now when we're selling the building to a customer, right? It is now like any other standard business, right? So you're in business. Your margin depends on how cheaply you can source raw materials
and what value I can add to your customer,
and what value you can add and what price you can sell, right? Now, any business needs a certain amount of money in order to be able to survive.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
And if you provide a really high quality product, you can have a higher margin. If you provide a, let's say, a milks and bread product, then you have to have a smaller margin. And that's in the nature of various businesses, right? But then it becomes a business decision of how much margin you want to add to this outcome that you're doing. But it is no longer something that has to be done on the side or shadily or quietly.
So, Amit, my take on this is, and I joined the business 15 years ago, and about 15 years ago now. And the first thing I did was to go and sell to architects.
Right.
My experience with designers and architects in general have been that if you're starting out young in your career, what the issue was 15 years ago was that, or maybe 20 years ago, was that clients were not looking up to an architect. It was like, as you said, an inconvenience that they had to live with. I think the image of architects in India over the last 7-8 years has significantly improved. But for a lot of architects, unless you were a big name in the city, you weren't getting work easily. And if you were getting work, you were actually having to undercut on your fees to land that job, right? And therefore, you need a team, you need to pay your rents, you need to pay everything. And in India, sadly, the clients cut money. वो एंड में ना वो नहीं जी, मान लीजिए 10 लाख की फीस की बात हुई है, वो एंड में 1.5-2 लाख रुपया कोई ना कोई एक्सक्यूज पे काट देगा, वो होता है. So I think the architects then got pushed into like, look, I need to do something for my survival, right? And then they turned to the material suppliers. And once that trend took on, it just became par for course, where I think the clients today know for a fact that एक कट तो जा ही रहा है. Suppliers have built it into their costing and pricing, and it becomes very difficult when a true architect says, "Can you just pass on everything to the client?" And you're like, "How? Because we have distributors, and the material goes through them, and how do you pass that on?" And and in fact, we've had cases where an architect has asked us to pass on whatever schemes and benefits that is built in, and then turn around 6 months later and say, अच्छा आपने pass on तो कर दिया, but कुछ तो रखा ही होगा ना मेरे
Oh my
लिए.
God.
um,
You know,
it is and then we later realize the client ने उसका पैसा काट दिया. एंड में जो भी फीस उनकी डिसाइड हुई थी, जितने भी लाख रुपए की फीस डिसाइड हुई थी, उसके 10-15-20% तो क्लाइंट ने उसको पेमेंट ही नहीं किया. सो ही इज लाइक, व्हाई वाज आई सो गुड टू द क्लाइंट इन पासिंग द बेनिफिट ऑन इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस? एंड I think clients are becoming better in India. I think as architecture as a space is becoming more respected. 15-20 साल पे तो when you go to smaller cities, वो तो engineers आप कहते थे architect को.
Correct.
But yeah, I hope it just goes away, this trend.
I think, so what I was saying was that we cannot possibly have a industry working at a large level where this is still happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think both of the things that you mentioned, to my mind, both of them are fundamentally incorrect.
Right.
One, that the client doesn't pay. And second, the architect having to compensate.
And now the issue is that even when the client starts paying, because that habit or that
right?
ecosystem has gone developed.
And I think they are doing themselves a disservice by continuing to take part in this sort of system, right? I think it's going to have to come to an end at some point. It'll either get formalized, like for instance, if you hire an interior designer in the UK, they charge a 50% fee on all furniture purchases that you make, right? Because they have to go with you to the furniture shop and specify the upholstery and make sure it's done properly. And so you know that, okay, I'm buying, let's say $100,000, 100,000 pounds worth of furniture. And so I have to pay 15,000 pounds to the designer. And that's a well understood system, right? And so the client is aware of the arrangement. I think we will have to eventually come to that sort of system, but it cannot be done on the sly. I think let's just leave it there.
Yes. No, right? I agree with you. I think it has to be formalized. I think if the nation needs to grow and this industry needs to get formalized and it needs to scale and actually deliver high quality value, then this under the table deals have to disappear. And on the good part is it is getting, I have started to see a trend of architectural firms that have started scaling beyond just doing 3 or 4 projects at a time. When they're doing 15-20 projects at a time or 30 projects at a time, they are not looking at kickbacks anymore because time ही नहीं है.